If you see a 9-9, Olga Korbut's won a gold medal. There it is.
5 seconds left in the game. Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
Hello, I'm Vince Hunt and welcome to our podcast series Sports in the Cold War. So far we've looked at more than 20 important themes in Cold War sports history, with plenty more to come. Why not follow the series on Twitter with the hashtag Cold War Sports, or rate and review the shows on iTunes, or drop Laura Deal an email at the Wilson Centre with your thoughts. The question of professional athletes has long bothered the world of sport, particularly in the Olympics, which were originally designed to be competition between amateurs. And when the athletes are from the Soviet Union, the issue of professionalism becomes even more complicated. Sylvain Dufraisse from the Sorbonne in Paris is studying the development of elite athletes in the Soviet Union from the 1930s, and I'm delighted that he's with me now. Sylvain, I imagine that this is a particularly difficult issue.
Yes, it's a particularly difficult issue because the sportsmen in the Soviet Union are said to be amateurs. And during the Cold War, this question was used in international federation or in the IOC to discredit Soviet sports, the issue of amateurism and professionalism. So when the Soviet Union had decided to enter this arena of international sports, to decide to enter federation, IOC, they, in the federation, they were quite nervous about the situation, and so they looked upon the situation of sportsmen and of elite of athletes in the Soviet Union. For example, in the IOC archive, we can find a lot of letters from the IOC president Ed Strom to the other members of the executive committee, where he is giving information about the situation in the Soviet Union through Swedish newspapers, through French newspapers, and to explain that they are not amateurs and that they are not practicing sport as they should be, and that they are not respecting the international rules of sport.
What would you consider to be the definition of professionalism? I mean, for example, that's to be paid for something that you do. There are ways around that if you're given a flat, if you're given a car.
The question of professionalism is quite difficult, and particularly in sport, because at first sociologists have shown that the process of professionalization may be multifaceted. First, it could be earning money from an activity. It's the first definition of professionalization. But other sociologists have shown that also it's having a career, doing a career in sport. And so in sport and in the Soviet Union, this issue may be quite different. You can earn money from a fictitious job, but also from you can be professional because you are given a flat by the sports society, or you're given all the money bonuses from sports societies and from the state. So it's quite intricate.
And I imagine, from your perspective, that it's been a little detective work in identifying what you call professionalism and what the Soviet athletic system would say is not professionalism.
This question is quite interesting because from the 30s till the 80s, there are a lot of law regulation to make this process of professionalization. During the 30s and at the beginning of the 40s, at the end of the 40s, the sportsmen are paid by sports societies and they're registered as, for example, coach attendant or cooker or accountant, so they had fictitious job. And in 1947, there is a big reform about economy in the Soviet Union, to do economy, in fact. And so they did a big reform and they created grants for sportsmen in 1947, but only 610 grants for top athlete sportsmen. And to get these grants, you should have a a high level of practice, and being part of the national or the Soviet team. And you could earn, for example, the biggest amount is 2,000 rubles a month, which is very big for in the society of the end of the 40s. Sport societies, to attract the best sportsmen, offered sportsmen flats, putevki, voucher to have holidays, and also camera to do photos, and also sportsmen were given cars by sport societies. But it was not by the state. It was a mean for sport societies to attract the best sportsmen in their sport societies. So it's interesting to see that even in Soviet Union, there are a sort of capitalism and capitalist laws in the realm of sport.
And because of this system of sports societies almost sponsoring and supporting an athlete, do we get the development post-war of elite clubs?
Yes, this system was in fact used by sports societies to develop football team and also hockey team. And one of the best example we can use is the example of the son of Stalin. The son of Stalin, at the end of the 40s and at the beginning of the 50s, had decided to create his own sports society, and to attract the best sportsmen, he offered them a lot of money, flats in very nice place, and also cars, and so on. And so the other leaders of sports societies had written letters to the leaders of the Physical Culture Committee to say that it's not possible that one man can attract all those sportsmen in his own sports society. So they had written the sport committee letters to ask it if he could regulate this part of sports.
So this is Stalin's son,
Yes.
creating a sporting dynasty using corrupt methods.
It was not corruption. It was the system as functioned during the 30s. So he was using, not corruption, he was using the way sport societies have functioned, and it was not illegal to do that. All the sport societies, even the leaders who had written those letters, did that. So they were against the son of Stalin because the scale was too big.
And so was Stalin's son successful in creating a sporting dynasty?
He was successful in creating one of the biggest team in one of the biggest sports society in the USSR, but only for a few years, because in the middle of the 50s, his sports societies disappeared, and so I think it's linked to Stalin's death.
So after Stalin's death, his son was no longer really as influential as he had been.
Yes, in the realm of sports.
Let's talk about the cartoon that you've chosen to illustrate the dynamics of this argument. Tell me a little about the illustration.
This illustration had been published in Crocodile, satirical newspapers. And what's interesting in this cartoon is that you have critical view about professionalization of sportsmen in the USSR. You can see on this cartoon, first part, 3 sportsmen are breaking records. One skaters, one skier, and a motorcycler. And they are breaking world records. They are very performant on tracks and in stadiums. But on the second part of the cartoon, they are not on tracks and in stadiums. They are in political lesson. And in political lesson, these record breakers are not as good as on tracks. And they cannot read, for example, books. And so that's very funny because as they are training all day long, they cannot have proper education, and so they are illiterate, and so they cannot read what professors want them to read. And it's very interesting to see that in this cartoon and in Crocodile, because it is at a moment where in other newspapers sportsmen are described as well-educated men, very literate men who are practicing sports and reading poems. And so it's not the image the government wants to promote in this case.
So there is an educational price to pay for the professionalisation of athletes.
Yes, there is a price to pay to professional sportsmen, and these topics will pop up again at the end of the 50s because there are scandals about sportsmen. The most well-known is the scandal with Streltsov, a footballer who is said to have raped a girl. And it was a big scandal in the press. Many articles to criticize what Soviet powers have created. And they have created sportsmen, but very illiterate and also ill-educated sportsmen.
You've been listening to a podcast from the series Key Moments in Cold War Sports History, a project bringing together experts from around the world and hosted here on the Wilson Centre's online digital archive at digitalarchive.org. These podcasts are part of the project The Global History of Sport in the Cold War, which is sponsored by the National Endowment of the Humanities, directed by Professor Bob Edelman of UC San Diego, Professor Chris Young from the University of Cambridge, and Dr. Christian Ostermann of the Woodrow Wilson Centre, and run in collaboration with the German Historical Institute Moscow, the Jordan Centre for Advanced Russian Studies at New York University, and Pembroke College, University of Cambridge. The presenter is Vince Hunt, and the series is produced by Vince Hunt and Laura Deal.